On the evening of July 23rd, 2009, a man named Edwin Rist began a carefully planned heist. His target was a museum that he'd scoped out over several weeks, but his prize wasn't jewels or art or the Declaration of Independence. It was birds. Dead birds, specifically. He was after preserved tropical birds held in a museum called the Natural History Museum at Tring, a sub-branch of the London Natural History Museum. He managed to steal nearly 300 taxidermied birds that night, and while the collection has enormous scientific value, Rist wanted them for a much stranger reason. Okay, before we can really unpack how bananas this entire situation was, let's start by talking about the museum that got robbed. The Natural History Museum at Tring was founded in 1892 as the private museum collection of Walter Rothschild, the second Baron of the Rothschild estate. It was home to the weird and interesting objects he collected in his spare time, as rich Victorians would often do. When he died, he donated the building and his collection to the Natural History Museum in London, who used the Tring building as a sort of satellite campus of the main museum, largely focused on taxidermy. The public-facing exhibits contain all sorts of animals, from mammals to reptiles, but the behind-the-scenes collection is where this museum's notoriety really comes from. It's one of the most complete and comprehensive collections of taxidermied birds in the world. The Tring is home to more than 1 million avian specimens, including 750,000 taxidermied skins, 300,000 egg clutches, and thousands of skeletons, nests, and fully mounted display birds. They have specimens representing 95% of the known species of birds on Earth. Most of these are kept behind the scenes and will never be put on display. And while that seems a little stingy, there's a perfectly good reason that the museum needs so many birds.
A lot of the research I do is about the evolution of the anatomy, the morphology, the physical bird. And there's just lots of questions you can't ask about bird biology from wild birds. And the museum, natural history museums, and the collections that they have gathered and provide have created an important context for studying that.
That's Richard Prum, an ornithologist and evolutionary biologist at Yale University, and head curator of vertebrate zoology at the Peabody Museum of Natural History. We wanted to talk to him about this story, and not just because he's a bird guy, but we'll get to that. We also wanted to know what goes into keeping a museum collection, because there's a lot going on behind the scenes in a museum. And a big part of that work is making sure that researchers have really good records to go with every object in the collection.
We are eager to make sure that the specimens themselves are preserved, but without the data associated with them, they become just sort of curiosities. And what we really need to do is preserve as well the data of the original place in the world where the bird was from, the date, and all the other information that comes with that specimen. In most bird skins, that's a little paper tag that's tied onto that particular specimen. And then in our case, and most collections now, the data from the labels is computerized and a large database that's searchable, so we can find all of our birds that were collected on a particular date, or in a particular county or nation, or of a particular family or genus, all sorts of ways to search the data. And that becomes a big part of our mission.
Without that data, the birds aren't nearly as valuable to researchers. Like, you can't study bird variation across locations if you don't know where any of your birds came from. But this collection isn't just important for what it means to modern scientists. There are incredibly important historical objects in these shelves too. Some were collected by famed and in some cases controversial naturalists like Alfred Russel Wallace, James Cook, and even Charles Darwin.
We have specimens from all of these eras and personalities, and of course, many of them contributed overwhelming important discoveries to science itself. And many figures that we know well, Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace, Bates and companies that began their scientific careers through collecting of biodiversity in far-flung continents. This is both, a fascinating piece of scientific history and part of our culture and our cultural legacy. In many cases, this was exploitative relationship with the different countries that they worked in. But in all cases, it was the primary mission was trying to create a permanent record of biodiversity.
So these collections are important resources for researchers, and they're also valuable historical objects. There were calls to move the collection to London going as far back as 1969, but whether due to cost or logistics, they remained in Hertfordshire. And in an ironic twist, a curator at this same museum had published a report on the dangers to collections like his own, citing theft as a concern. 4 years later, he'd be proven right. Edwin Rist was an American student at the Royal Academy of Music in London, studying the flute. But music was just one of his passions, and his other had to do with rare birds. That's what led him to the Tring on the night of June 23, 2009, carrying wire clippers, a diamond-tipped glass cutter, and a suitcase. Somehow, the guard on duty didn't notice the alarm that Rist activated when he shattered the museum's window, nor did he see Rist clamber in the window on the CCTV cameras covering the museum's exterior. And the cases holding these precious birds weren't locked. So Rist was able to fill his bag with his bounty and escape the way he came in. Bafflingly, even though the broken glass was discovered and the collection inspected the next day, the museum staff didn't realize anything had been taken. They checked only their most conventionally valuable items, and when they saw that all were present, they called it there. It was a full month later when a curator was showing a visiting researcher the collection that the empty drawers were finally discovered, and there were a lot of them. In total, Rist stole 299 birds belonging to 16 different species and subspecies. And he didn't just let them all sit around. Over several months, he meticulously sold this trove in small pieces, in some cases literally cutting them apart or plucking individual feathers off the skins to be sold to his adoring customers. So what did all those people want with the birds? Well, I'll tell you, but first, a quick ad break. Thanks to Brilliant, the interactive online learning platform, for supporting this SciShow video. Brilliant helps you expand your horizons at your own pace, so you can take your time and make sure a concept really sinks in before moving on to the next lesson. Or you can binge lessons like your favorite TV show and gain knowledge way faster than any semester schedule would allow for. Brilliant fits into your pacing and your life. If you just have minutes to spare in a waiting room, on a train platform, or in line at your local food truck, you can learn big concepts in just a little time. To try Brilliant for free, visit brilliant.org/scishow, scan the QR code on screen, or click on the link in the video description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Rist's customers were hobbyists in a niche art practice of Victorian fly tying, where feathers from specific birds were used to make lures for salmon fishing. The lures themselves are intricate and beautiful, and Edwin himself was a renowned lure tyer, often appearing at conventions and expos to practice the art in front of a crowd. The funny thing is, most people who make them now don't even use them for fishing, and the salmon don't seem any more fond of these lures than standard feathers. The community uses the same recipes that were written down in the Victorian days, which was a time where taxidermied birds were all the rage. Women wore them on their hats, and their feathers were used as decorations, and yes, even for fishing lures. Today, some of these birds are endangered or even extinct in the wild, and way more are internationally protected, meaning that their feathers are hard to come by, since getting them from currently living birds is a no-no. So anyone who had a trove of these feathers could make a fortune if they knew who to sell them to, which Rist very much did. And here is where Richard Prum re-enters the story. Prum heard about the theft when the news broke and got personally involved right away.
Anyway, I became very interested when I found out that many of the specimens were birds that I had a particular research interest in. Having worked on the physics and anatomy of avian structural colors, optical colors made by feathers. I've worked on a lot of really beautiful birds with lots of interest to the public, and including cotinga, vividly blue, and various birds of paradise, all sorts of iridescent birds, etc. And then I don't remember exactly the details, but it soon became clear that all of these specimens that had been stolen, or most of them, were of particular interest to a very specific community of fly fishermen or people associated with fly fishing in the preparation of lures or flies for trout and salmon fishing.
So he did what any scientist would do. He went to a local fly fishing conference looking for the stolen birds. He even managed to track down one man who'd sold a skin that matched a species that had been stolen in the Tring heist. While the bird was already gone by the time he got there, he's confident it was one of the missing birds from the Tring. With hundreds of other birds in his possession, Rist was poised to make a fortune selling them. His ill-gained treasure included cotingas, flame bowerbirds, resplendent quetzals, and several types of birds of paradise, many of which were so rare in the fly tying world that a single feather could be worth thousands. Rist sold these feathers in small amounts, often pretending to have found a single skin at a yard sale, or claiming that he was selling the birds on behalf of a private collector who wished to remain anonymous. Over a span of 13 months, he continued to post more and more feathers for sale on his favorite message boards, while also offering full skins to individual collectors. He also sold items on eBay under the username FlutePlayer1988. Thanks to leads from Prum and others involving fly tying, including a man identified only by his nickname Irish, British authorities were eventually able to uncover the identity of the online user who had sold so many museum-quality birds. And Rist was arrested on November 12, 2010, just one day after his final lot of feathers was posted online for sale. His remaining birds were confiscated. He'd plucked many of them and sold the feathers, and he also removed the identifying labels from the birds he hadn't yet destroyed, meaning that of the 299 he stole, only 102 still had research value. Many of these birds were irreplaceable, both as scientific objects and as historic ones. And now, instead of furthering our understanding of ornithology, many of the specimens sit in private collections of random people, taken apart piece by piece and twisted into salmon fly fishing lures that will never be used. The same ornamentation that these birds evolved over millennia to attract mates and show off has captivated humans for just as long as we've known they were there. From the Victorian and Edwardian fashion trends, collectors and their curio cabinets, and now these fly tyers, there's a long legacy of humans being just as enamored with bird feathers as the mates they evolved to attract.
Birds are beautiful because they're beautiful to themselves. They are aesthetic agents in their own ornamental and social sexual evolution. And as a result of the kind of choices they make, we have a complicated history over millions of years of the elaboration of an aspect of the plumage that functions particularly not just in the material world to protect from predators or to fly, but in the subjective experiences of other birds. That is, they function in the minds of other birds. And as a result, they are amazing to study scientifically. But these same features that make them amazing as scientific examples of non-human beauty make them attractive as art forms, as materials for derivative art forms by, human cultures forever.
It's sad that these feathers, which exist to spread their species, are the very thing that makes them so tempting for humans to exploit. Ultimately, Edwin Rist's love for fishing lures made from rare birds left him on the hook, and the only thing that he caught was himself.